Fisherman Kurt loved discovering new places as well as to look for new species of fish, but he never imagined stumbling upon the biggest mystery of his life. He and his crew pulled an unknown object out of the water without realizing that this was the beginning of something very important. What they discovered next gave them chills down their spines. But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. Kurt couldn't wrap his head around the object in front of him. It was far bigger and heavier than he expected, which would almost cost him his most expensive crane. But that wasn't all. His crew yelled at the sight of the object. They wanted to throw it back into the sea and never return again, although Kurt had other ideas. This wasn't some object that they were ever going to find again, and he was about to discover what it was. They unhooked the cable when the object successfully landed on deck. Kurt walked around the object and took everything in. This wasn't something he could solve on his own, though. He needed backup. But when the backup arrived, they told him something he would never forget. There are many kinds of items that can go missing in the sea. Almost 95% of those things aren't discovered yet, which makes people very curious about what could be lurking in the deepest, darkest parts of the sea. For this reason, Kurt initially set up his diving and fishing business. Kurt had always been interested in the sea, especially in the many different species of fish. It is remarkable how many of them aren't even discovered yet, as well as how every species adapt to its home. Kurt loves to discover new species and help put them on the map. Yet fish is not the only thing he finds. It wasn't just about the fish for Kurt. Yes, his father had been a fisherman, and yes, Kurt had always known he would follow in his footsteps because of his love for fish, but there was something else as well. Kurt is an adventurous man who is always longing to discover new places. But there is one problem. The major issue Kurt struggled with is that he would sometimes discover a place no one was supposed to see. Kurt had received multiple warnings from private corporations that he had to stop what he was doing. He'd already found 2 spots the government tried to keep secret from the rest of the world as well, but that only made his desire grow stronger. What if there were more cover-up spots? Kurt felt that it was his duty as a citizen to uncover these mysteries and show them to the world. His day started as usual. He woke up at the break of dawn and got ready for work. Sometimes he would solely look for new, undiscovered places, while sometimes he would mainly catch fish to sell at the local market nearby. Today would be his fishing day, although not everything went according to plan. Kurt was walking to his boat in the early morning when he saw that his crew was already there. They had been prepping the engine, sail, and ropes so that they could be fully ready to set sail as soon as possible. The captain came aboard and greeted his men, after which they took off. Once they were out of the port and onto the open water, a crew member asked his captain where they were heading for the day. Kurt did not even know it himself. He wanted to follow the current and be guided by the waves, as he had done before. Without questioning this, his crew agreed. This was a way of sailing that Kurt often used when aiming to find new places. He would track the course and write it down on a map. This map had been with him since his first day as a ship owner, filled with all color-coded his routes so that they would never go to the same place twice. Smooth sailing so far, but when the crew had been cruising for almost an hour, something unexpected happened. The waves started to pick up, after which a strong current arose. It was a surprisingly heavy one, eventually causing the ship to become unmanageable. The ship started to be swept away. The whole crew got alerted and everyone tried their best to retake control and to manage the ship, but this was in vain. Even though Kurt and his crew were not in life danger yet, they couldn't prevent the vessel to be drifting for half an hour until the waves went down again. Now it was time to look at the damage. Luckily, the crew could conclude that not a lot of damage had been done directly to the ship, although they had drifted very far into the sea, much further than they anticipated. Kurt chose his best divers for this job, as this underwater mystery could potentially be something very interesting. Leon and Mark suited up, filled their gas tanks, and checked each other's equipment. They went into the water. Although the two experienced divers did not know they were up for a big surprise, Kurt kept in contact with his divers through radio signals, while he could follow them via their cameras as well. Nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary underwater until there was suddenly something appeared on the screen. Kurt and his men that were watching the screen didn't recognize what it was. Kurt's divers almost swam into the object because it was camouflaged under the water. It was dark and looked like a shadow, but it also seemed too symmetrical to be something naturally created. What their cameras were capturing was definitely unlike anything that any of the crew members had ever seen. It really looked like something out of a movie, an object that could be of alien origin. Kurt quickly ordered the men to return to the surface so they could think of their next step. They decided that it would be best to cease their search for fish and bring this item to the shore instead. Kurt was convinced that this object could potentially be of great value, yet not all men were happy with this decision. Some of them didn't trust the situation and wanted nothing to do with this strange object, and thus the crew started to hesitate about whether to follow Kurt's orders. Especially two men that had seen the object on the diving screen believed that it had to have been here underwater for a reason, and that it should therefore stay there. Kurt insisted, as he knew that he had to get this object to the surface one way or another. In the end, it was decided that Leon and Mark would go back down with a red cable to wrap this around the square object. Although it could be more heavy than Kurt expected, the fishing boat had an exceptionally powerful crane, so hardly anything could go wrong, right? As soon as the divers had done their job properly and the crane had pulled the object up, things started to go south. The mysterious item was heavier than Kurt expected, and the boat began to rock frantically. It almost tipped over when the object finally pulled out of the water. What they saw shocked them to their core. They had pulled an ancient artifact out of the water. It had been stolen from a museum almost a decade ago. Kurt was rewarded for finding the artifact, and it was returned to its rightful place.